Hey, good morning. It's Mark here with another morning rant. It's 3:45. I've been sitting here for about 30 minutes. Anyway, let's get into some news, shall we? And, I was going to do a twofer. Really, I was going to do a one subject rant this morning. I was going to talk about the withdrawal of Afghanistan troops and how we should have gotten out of Afghanistan years ago. I was going to talk about how Afghanistan is never going to be a democratic republic of any kind ever. You can go back through history to see that landlocked country is doomed and that it doomed itself. And how America should stay its ass out of nation building. It doesn't seem to work in some cases, in most cases. I was going to talk about that, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'll talk about that later. We should have gotten out of Afghanistan years ago, especially after Osama bin Laden was killed. Should have left. We got Osama. Don't fuck with America. We're out. But Americans are arrogant, and we want to prove ourselves. So we stayed. Close to $2 trillion spent. Complete waste. Lives were lost. Lives were destroyed. For what? The Taliban just took back Kabul. And we still have gotten all our troops. As a matter of fact, we had to send more troops there. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to discuss Mark Levin. You might not know who Mark Levin is, and that's fine, because sometimes he don't even know who he is. Mark Levin is a radio personality turned TV personality on Fox News. I myself used to listen to Mark Levin on my late night rides home from work in Camp Pendleton. Side note, when I was in Camp Pendleton, when I was in California, we were in San Diego. We moved down to San Diego, and that's another whole story. But I had to drive back up to Oceanside, which is where Camp Pendleton is located. It was a 45-minute drive there in the morning. It was a 2, if not 2.5 hour drive back. So if I didn't leave work at exactly 16:30, roughly 16:45, I didn't get home until at least 18:30. If I didn't leave work around 4:30, 4:45, I didn't get home until around 6:30 p.m. And that was for 2 years. Anyway, I used to listen to Mark Levin because he came on late. He was the late afternoon drive talk radio show. And, I used to argue at the computer. I used to argue at the TV. I used to argue at the radio. And he was one of the ones I would argue with, whether he knew it or not. But here he is trying to hawk his book, American Marxism. And he's shitting on Democrats, I guess, trying to explain Marxism and what the Democrat Party is doing is bad and wrong for this country. And he lies throughout this thing. So it's a 12-minute clip, but I don't think I'm going to go through the whole 12 minutes because after about 6, he starts bloviating on some other stuff.
We go to them. I want to talk to you. I was thinking about this before the show. Do you realize we have, in many respects, less liberty today than we did before the Revolutionary War?
Okay, let's stop right there. This fool just said we had more liberty prior to the American Revolutionary War than we do today. Now it's obvious. It's obvious who he's talking about. He damn sure ain't talking about my ancestors. He's not talking about the Native Americans. He's talking about white people. He's talking about white men. White women, let's go to white women. White women had no freedoms. When George Washington married Martha Custis, Martha Custis was married to the Custis estate, the Custis family. They, in turn, they were rich people. Martha became rich on the death of her husband. I can't remember his name. When George Washington married Martha, he became one of the richest people in Virginia. Why is that? Because he had control over her estate. Now, he couldn't sell her slaves because they were her slaves given to her upon the death of her husband. So if he sold her slaves, he had to repay her. But she necessarily wasn't in charge of her finances. He was. Women had no rights, especially white women. White women had no rights prior to 1920. So that's just white women. So what the fuck is he talking about? To say that Americans, white people, this is the only way. There is no other way you can put this. There is absolutely no other way you can put this. He is saying white people had more freedoms prior to 1776 than they do today. That's what he's talking about, because you can't say it no other way. No one else had freedoms like the white man had prior to the American Revolution. That's so within the first 12 seconds, 17 seconds, he knew how to shot himself in the foot.
Look at taxation. Look at taxation.
What about taxation?
It's a disaster. Think about it prior to the Revolutionary War. Look at representation.
Okay. Representation and taxation prior to the Revolutionary War. What did we fight for? Well, not we. What did they fight for? Prior to 1770, he said prior to the Revolutionary War. So you got to go back prior to the Revolutionary War. You got to go to the 1732 molasses tax, the 1756 sugar tax, the stamp tax, the Declaratory Act. So what the fuck is he talking about? If you talk about taxation and representation, they had none. They had none. This is elementary, dear Watson. This is child's play. And if you're not, what's the word I'm looking for? If you're not learned in American history, you will never know. You would think this fool is right. The reason why they fought the American Revolutionary War was because they felt like they were being taxed without being represented in the parliament. And the Declaratory Act told them, you have no rights other than what we give you. So if they had more rights prior to the revolution than they do now, they had no rights back then. I can drop the mic before he even gets started. He's an idiot.
Do we have representation today? Have you even tried?
Did you have it back then? Did you have it prior to the Revolutionary War?
Tried to meet your member of Congress lately? It's impossible. And if you do meet your representative, what are you going to tell them? They're passing 2,700 pages of omnibus spending bills.
Okay. You can go to Congress and you can meet your representative. There's a lot of red tape. These people are going to, okay, for instance, Andrew Jackson. When Andrew Jackson won the presidency in 1828, I want to say, in 1828, when Andrew Jackson won the presidency, he had a party at the White House. So much so that he had to sneak out of a window because it got too crowded, it got too hyped. So before then, like, let's go back to 1802, 1803. Thomas Jefferson. When Thomas Jefferson was president, it is said that he used to answer the door to the White House. You go knock on the door, he would answer in slippers and in a nightgown. Times have changed to where you have to have security. You can't just go up and meet your representative. But hey, I would submit to you that when my wife and I, when we went to D.C. on a trip, mostly a homage, a pilgrimage for me, but when we went on a trip to Washington D.C., we passed by a lot of senators and congressmen. I didn't get a chance to meet them, but they were there. They wasn't surrounded by security. They had a couple of staffers around them. I think I passed by Lisa Murkowski. But I couldn't remember her name, and she looked like she was deep in conversation, so I didn't want to interrupt her. But they're there. You can meet them. I went to Senator Tom Tillis, Republican senator from North Carolina. He sponsored us into the White House and into the Senate. It's like part of their official duties there. You can request flags and things like that. But anyway, I had to go through my senator to get to the White House and other things. So I went to his office, met his staffers. I didn't meet Tom Tillis himself, which is fine. It is what it is. But anyway, you can meet your congressman.
And they're doing it in the middle of the night. You have no idea what's in those bills.
Okay.
That's less liberty than you had when we didn't have representation.
Okay. Now, he's talking about doing a $2,500 page omnibus bill. We has a lot of stuff in there that entails spending. They got upset about the Affordable Care Act, where it was like 2,000. I don't know, a lot of thousands of pages, and how they passed it in the middle of the night and all this other stuff. Well, I would submit to you, sir, that if you were a student of American history, you would understand how the Constitution was written. The Second Continental Congress, they met in secrecy. Their constituents, the legislatures of each state, they sent their representatives there solely for the purpose of revamping the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. They did not send them there to scrap the Articles and write a whole new Constitution. New York had to bow out because they didn't get directions from the legislature on what to do. Go back and watch David McCullough's HBO special, John Adams. If you don't read the book, go watch the movie. They were not there to write the Constitution. They were there to revamp the Articles, to amend the Articles. They ended up scrapping the Articles and writing a whole new Constitution. And in that meeting, they closed the doors. They sealed off the windows. If you go back and watch that scene, they're sitting there in the dark with candles lit. Everybody's sweating. Everybody tired because they're talking about different liberties and freedoms and things like that to add to this new document. They wrote it in secrecy, and then after they wrote it, after they signed it, they had to go sell it to the American people. So again, I submit to you the question: what the f*** is he talking about? What is he talking about? He's counting on you not to know American history. He's counting on you to trust his words. This is child's play.
Because what happens here is you get to vote, but you don't get to know anything. And that's the great irony of what's taking place. The Democrat Party has decided that it is going to take control of this country, and it is going to take control of this society and every aspect of this culture. And it's doing so, devouring one piece at a time. And we've reached a pinnacle now, where we either claw our way back or we're going to lose this country. Is it too much?
Who is he talking about? Who's going to lose the country? Who's going to lose the country? Who's he talking about?
To ask the 19 Republicans in the United States Senate who sold out?
He's upset. He's upset that 19 Republicans sided with the Democrats and voted for the $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill. He's mad at that.
At least half of the American people to vote the right way? You know, you look at the founders of this country. They really put their lives and their fortunes on the line. All we ask them to do is vote the right way.
What is the right way? What is normal? Vote his way. Don't spend money on infrastructure. Don't give in to the Democrats. Don't do anything bipartisan. Vote the way we tell you to vote. Don't vote your conviction. Vote the way we tell you to vote. We put you there to block Joe Biden, not to help him.
And they can't do it, led by Mitch McConnell, the McConnell Republicans, all 19 of them. 30 did the right thing, but McConnell leads a minority of a minority, 19. And he helped grease the skids for what's going to be a massive expansion of already a massive welfare state. And most of our laws are not made by Congress. They're made by this massive welfare state, unelected bureaucrats, millions of them, who work in allegiance to and alliance with the Democrat Party.
Now let's talk about the welfare state for a second. Prior to Social Security being implemented in the 1940s, families did this. They all stayed as close together as possible. When you got too old to work, you moved in with a family member. And you worked your way, you stayed there. Grandma moved in with the family, and, you guys helped her along through her retirement or whatever until she passed away. And then the same thing happened to you and your children, and it just moved on. Well, somebody got the idea that, hey, I don't want to do this shit. I'm old enough now to where, I'm sane enough to where I can live on my own. There are presidents who died poor. And we're just talking about presidents here. There are presidents who died poor because they had no pension. They had no, not necessarily life insurance, but they had no pension. They had no retirement when they retired. So the best thing they can do is go around making speeches until they died. Or I'm saying this because I'm thinking about President Grant. He had to try to shit out a book before he died because he figured the royalties from that book would help his wife. And right before he died, he finished the book and was able to sustain his wife until her death. So the powers that be thought, hey, it'll be a good idea if we did a sort of pyramid scheme to where the younger class of Americans would pay for the retirement of the elderly. If you don't like it, fix it. That's the beauty of this country. We get to try out different laws. We tried out prohibition, didn't like it, so we rescinded it. So he's talking about a welfare state, but guarantee it, he may apply for Social Security, and this man is a millionaire. Any government assistance that comes his way, he will take.
And I want to talk about that a little bit in my opening discussion with you. And I want to turn to American Marxism. This book has sold 750,000 copies. It has received no attention by the left, purposely.
Okay. The whole reason why he's talking about what he's talking about is, and I'm not going to go through this because I'm close to 20 minutes, but he said all of this in the first 2 minutes because he want to promote that book. So much so, he's going to read to you some passages inside the book. And he's going to do one other thing when he starts reading. It's in the book. In this book, he's talking about something else.
It has received no attention by the Republican establishment, purposely. This book goes around both. It's aimed at you, the people of this country, the people who brought us the Reagan Revolution, the Tea Party Revolution, the Gingrich Revolution, and the Trump Revolution. This is aimed at Democrats and Republicans and everything in between. This is aimed at blacks and browns and yellows and reds and whites, whatever your physical characteristics are of no consequence. If you love liberty and you love this country, it is for you. And I am beating the pots and pans because what's taking place is going to be irreversible at some point. And it's going to be up to us to do something about it, each and every one of us, because you cannot rely on Mitch McConnell and that gang to do a damn thing right. Here in part is what I say in American Marxism. American Marxism has adapted the language and allure of utopianism, which I wrote about at length in my book, Ameritopia. It is
That's what he wants to do. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to sell books. He goes out and talks about, in the book American Marxism, he talks about another book, Ameritopia. This is his sole thing right here. His sole understanding is to promote his books. Not just the book that he's promoting now, but the book that he wrote before that book. And before we go, like I said, I was going to go until at least 7 minutes, but I'm not even going to go to 7 minutes because he bloviates and uses a lot of big words, and he's really talking about absolutely nothing. And I can break it down like a fraction, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep this short. Let's go to, because he talks about how the country is being ruined and how we're taxing ourselves into oblivion. And I've talked about this before, and I'm just going to do this real quick. Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan raised taxes in his 8 years. He raised it about 11 times. So much so that George H.W. Bush's campaign statement was, read my lips. Exactly. Read my lips, no new taxes. Why would George H.W. Bush say that unless he knew taxes were being raised so much so that people were tired of it? He raised taxes 11 times. He got in the office. He said, read my lips, no new taxes. Got in the office and said, God damn, I got to raise taxes. Raise taxes. He raised taxes and he did not get Saddam Hussein. That's why he lost. Well, he raised taxes going against his campaign pledge. He did not get Saddam Hussein in the first Gulf War, and Ross Perot took votes from him. That's how Bill Clinton got into the White House. Right? So Republicans in 12 years taxed us into oblivion. So much so that a president, Bill Clinton, came in and kind of sort of fixed it, along with Republicans in the Senate and the House and Democrats. They worked together. They fixed the economy. In 2000, what did George W. Bush do? He took that $580+ billion surplus, gave it back to the American people, and deregulated. Enron, WorldCom, all those scandals. And then you had the housing crisis, all because of his deregulation. So much so, this country was so effed up that it chose a black man to get into the White House to fix it. So another Democrat comes in, he fixes the economy. Hands it off to a Republican. Trump comes in and shits on it. So now Joe Biden and the Democrats got to fix it again. But the Congress is so narrow, so tight, it's going to be kind of difficult for him to get stuff passed because he can't get stuff passed. So Mark Levin has lost his mind. And again, I can keep going.
Tyranny disguised as a desirable, workable, and even paradisiacal governing ideology. There are unlimited utopian constructs, for the mind is capable of infinite fantasies. But there are common themes. The fantasies take the form of grand social plans and experiments, the impracticability and impossibility of which, in small ways and large, lead to the individual's subjugation. Indeed, the economic and cultural agenda driven by President Joe Biden and the Democrat Party provide ample examples of this ideology and behavior at work. They include massive deficit spending, confiscatory taxation, and the regulation of all things large and small, drenched in Marxist class warfare propaganda.
He used a lot of big words that meant nothing. He made his own definitions. And he talked about adding to the bureaucracy and things like that. It was, man.
And a slew of executive orders claiming to end numerous historical and cultural injustices.
Donald Trump passed so many executive orders because he did not want to go through the Congress. And he had control. When he had control of the Congress for the first 2 years, they did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then they passed judges. And then when the Democrats took over the House, and not the Senate, but the House, excuse me. Forgive me. When the Democrats took over the House, that's when they started trying to block some stuff because they didn't want nothing passed. Oh, here comes another. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm allergic to the bullshit.
So too does their demand for absolute one-party control over the body politic through various extra-constitutional schemes and other means.
So you can go and watch this, but all he's talking about is the Democrat Party is trying to govern. They're trying to do things. Oh, I want to get to this thing.
As Marxism does not tolerate the competition of ideas or political parties. These efforts include changing the voting system to ensure Democratic Party control for decades.
No, if you get people to vote, and that's what scares them. The more people vote, not the more people vote, like the more times you vote, but the more you can get multiple millions of people to vote, that's gonna hurt the Republican Party. Because if you open up voting to everyone, let's give voting a national holiday, a day off, so people don't have to work and scramble to go vote during their lunch times, or to go vote before lunch, or go work, vote after work. Like, open it up to where everybody can vote. Now, I'm not against IDs. But don't close DMV so people can go get IDs. This is what they did, and I'm gonna go a little bit longer. This is what they did in Georgia.
Senate Bill 202, which is the state Senate bill you're referring to in the state of Georgia, it did not extend weekend voting. Here's what it did. You have a few counties that always show up for black lawmakers or black candidates and Democratic candidates. Those counties are DeKalb, Fulton, Clayton. Always show up 100% of the time, okay? Those counties have an extensive weekend voting regimen and early voting regimen. What the state of Georgia did is they created a uniform policy that mandated all 159 counties to engage in weekend voting, but it created a cap for how many they can do. That only adversely affected places that showed up for Democrats, because now they are limited on how many weekends they can offer. Here's another thing they did. They de facto eliminated what's called souls to the polls, or Sunday voting, where they wrote in the law that the county would have to make a decision to offer Sunday voting or Saturday voting, but they could not offer both. Now, what sense does that make, if not simply to stop the program of souls to the polls? And let me correct you on another point. The issue of bringing food and water to a precinct line has now been criminalized through the statute. So it is against the law to bring someone food or water who's waiting in line to vote in the state of Georgia, when it was already against the law to campaign to that individual in the state of Georgia. The reason why they made it against the law to bring someone food or water is because nonprofit organizations and churches would run commercials and say, if you come to this precinct that has a history of long lines, don't worry, we got you. We will give you food and water. Not partisan. They're not promoting a candidate. They're not breaking the election laws. So they made that action against the law to stop those commercials from encouraging people to come out and vote. Do you?
So there you go. There you go. That shit on everything this guy was talking about.
Which has as its purpose the eradication of the Republican Party and political competition.
They're going to go away anyway.
Attempting to eliminate the Senate filibuster rule so all manner of laws can be imposed on the country.
Okay, the filibuster. The filibuster did not exist until the 1960s, when they tried to block civil rights legislation. That this is a majority rule country. A majority rule country. So if you go back to 1789 all the way up to the 1960s, majority ruled. If it was 50+1 in the House or 50+1 in the Senate, and they passed a bill, it became law. The filibuster didn't start. They tried to do a gag rule, and that was for rates. That was for slavery also. Gag rule lasted about 7-10 years, but the filibuster came in the 1960s when they tried to block legislation for civil rights. It is not a constitutional issue. It is not a constitutional embedded thing. So I was going to go to 20 minutes. I'm at 30. Again, this guy's full of shit. He has no idea what he's talking about. Mark Levin has lost his mind. If he has not lost his mind already. One more. Let's see.
Without effective deliberation or challenge, threatening to breach separation of powers and judicial independence by plotting to pack the Supreme Court with...
Supreme Court has been packed before. It is going from 3 to 5 to 7 to 9 to 6 to... It's... People, I'm sorry. If you stayed the whole 30 minutes, hey, more power to you. Thank you for staying around. Thank you for sticking around. Again, Mark Levin has lost his mind. I'll get on Afghanistan and everything on another episode. But hey, we hit 250 followers, so that's great. That's great. We hit 250 followers. That's great. If you have not, if you are not following the Facebook page, please do so. I upload these videos to YouTube also, so go subscribe there. Again, if you stuck around to 31 minutes, I appreciate it. Thank you for sticking around, and have a great Monday, and I will see you guys on the next one. I'm out. Y'all have a great day.